Jacie.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good. So today, this was a little idea you and I had brainstormed up one day last week in the middle of chit-chatting, just about the idea of maybe letting some people in on our hallway conversations when we get really passionate and excited about talking about different kind of therapy ideas and projects that we're excited about. So this is the first time we're kind of giving it a try, just to see how things go and see if people who are watching might have something specific they'd like to learn a little bit more about or talk about. So how we thought we would run this is just, Jacie and I came up with an idea. Actually, does everybody know Jacie? Before I jump into that, I assume everybody knows everybody. Do you want to tell everybody who you are in a couple of words?
Sure. So yeah, my name's Jacie. I'm just finishing up my master's in counseling psychology with Yorkville University, and I am lucky enough to be doing my practicum with Rising Tides and Lori as my supervisor. So I'm a month in. Yeah, a month in already, and loving it. So really excited for the next 8 months.
Yeah.
7 months now, 8 months total that I'll be with you guys as a student.
Yeah, no, we're grateful to have you here. Actually, I know a month has gone fast, but in some ways it feels longer. It feels like you've been around for longer than a month.
It's true. Yeah, I know. I feel so comfortable here. I'm like, no, I've been here for years.
No, it's awesome. We're glad to have you. And, we love your energy and your ideas. And I think that, even doing this is to your credit, that it got us really excited to think about how we could be sharing some of this with other people. So without further ado, I guess what you and I had sort of talked about was taking a little bowl and kind of putting some just miscellaneous topics. It's not an exhaustive list of topics, but to keep it kind of fun and spontaneous, we thought we would just draw from a bowl, see what comes up, and have a little conversation about it. So are you ready?
I'm ready. And for future reference, if anybody wants topics added to the bowl, send us a message and we will add your topic to the bowl.
That would be awesome, actually, because it's almost hard to come up with the topics, right? If people have questions.
When you talk about it every day, you're like, what do you mean topics? This is just what we converse about.
All right, so we got, I don't know how many you and I came up with, probably 10 or 15. So let's just see what we're going to talk about today. Whew. So the one I pulled right off the top is, what is trauma? So not a light conversation, but let's dig in. What comes to mind for you when you think about what's trauma?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is the misconceptions around trauma. So a lot of people think trauma has to be, the big T. There had to be something long-term significant. Obviously, post-traumatic stress disorder, when people talk about that, it's often related to soldiers coming home from overseas or other, domestic violence situations, long-term exposure to trauma. But I think what people misconceive and tend to sort of belittle their own experiences of trauma, in the sense that anything we happen to us that shocks our system, whether that's physical, emotional, mental, psychological, that's a trauma.
Yeah.
And when we experience any kind of trauma, any kind of shock to the system, our survival instincts kick in. And if we haven't engaged in healing techniques, then those survival instincts are on constant overdrive. And that tends to create a lot of physical tension and anxiety. And, it rewires our brain into that fight and flight mode in our nervous system. So it doesn't have to be what we see in the movies in regards to what PTSD looks like in order for you to have, a trauma response that you're engaging with every day and maybe don't even realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, sometimes I share sort of a personal story with people to kind of highlight that, is that, I work with trauma. I've been a social worker for 20 years. You kind of think, what you know. And I had an experience of infertility when I was in my 30s and trying to get pregnant and being unsuccessful and seeing people who were, having babies in my peer group. And it actually wasn't until later, even though I was working as a counselor and a social worker, when I became more aware of what trauma meant, that I was like, oh God, no wonder I suffered so much during that time in my life. Because I think I was in a kind of just survival, protect myself. I withdrew from relationships. And when kind of like you said, when you start looking at what are the impacts of trauma, the stereotypical stuff is around, nightmares, flashbacks, kind of ruminating over the same thoughts and ideas. And when I kind of started looking at trauma in that lens, I was like, infertility is absolutely a traumatic experience. It wasn't, it's not to compare to other people's trauma, but just to know that you can heal from traumatic experiences, and that if we look carefully, we've all had something that has impacted us. And I think even my own story of infertility, when I think about it, having a good support network and, being able to talk to friends and family, being able to cry. And I kind of think about how I got through that time in my life really just kind of demonstrates the importance of healing, right? And getting through those things that happen to you and not staying stuck in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there a minute ago about not comparing your experience to others, I think is something that we would benefit from talking about a lot in general, because I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, I shouldn't be complaining. Other people have it worse. And that's something that our society seems to perpetuate a lot. And honoring your experience and being honest with yourself about your experience is not belittling other people's. It doesn't mean that you are complaining or being whiny or any of those things. You're just acknowledging your experience. And I remember when I was in my first year university, I went to a presentation, and someone in the presentation, it was about traumatic life events and how to recover from them. Mm-hmm. And what he said was, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Right. And you can't compare that to other people's worst or other people's best, right? I think one of the most important lessons we can learn from individual trauma is how to allow our experience to be what it is and not feel the need to belittle it or compare it to everyone else's.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think actually that's what sometimes stops people from getting help, is feeling like, well, who am I to go in and see a counselor about what I'm going through, when they're probably so busy and they see so many other people with real serious issues. But yeah, I love what that person said to you, because it's true. Like, that's the worst thing that happened to you, and that's your experience, and you're allowed to have those experiences.
Yeah,
for what they are. Yeah,
absolutely. And even when we're talking about childhood trauma, that's a big one as well. I have a lot of people say, well, my childhood was fine. Nobody was mean to me. Nobody hit me, like any of these things. But as children, we don't have logic. There isn't logic. It's all emotion. So if you're 4 years old and your mom has a new baby, and then all of a sudden, you were an only child, but now you have to share all of this love and attention. As a 4-year-old, that's traumatic. Yeah, and we can carry that our whole lives and not even understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. When you were speaking, one of my trauma trainers kind of said, if anyone comes in and said they had a wonderful childhood and nothing bad ever happened, that's a red flag. There's something else going on in that dynamic that makes somebody feel like they can't, be open to exploring. Because, and this happens a lot in therapy too. Like, people don't want to talk bad about their parents. They don't want to talk bad about their upbringing. And really, healing is not about talking bad. It's exactly like you said. It's just about learning from our own experiences. One of the things I've explored in therapy with my clients, and doing parts work and inner child work, and kind of understanding how and why we are the way we are today. And it's kind of gotten me on my own exploration of, I have really vivid memories now of little things that happened as a child that, like you said, they're not big T traumas, but man, did they ever leave a lingering impact on how I, my perfectionist tendencies, never wanting to make a mistake. And it's like, man, I remember that moment in grade 1 when that teacher kind of called me out for something. I was like, oh, I don't like this feeling. I never want to have that again. So it is just sort of interesting how our life kind of is a culmination of a number of experiences that some stay with us and some don't stay with us, but they're all just experiences. And that's part of how we develop.
Yeah. And then even if it is a big T trauma, one thing that I would say to that is healing is so possible, right? And because it's easy to kind of talk about, the little T trauma, and how you can heal from those. And that tends to exclude people with the big T trauma from the conversation, but it doesn't need to be. I have, incredible friends who are, I had 5 years out of the military, who came back and just really significant, all of those PTSD symptoms that you talked about earlier, the flashbacks, the, incapacitating anxiety and all of those things, who are now genuinely fulfilled and happy and content and peaceful. So those paths are just as possible as well.
Absolutely. And, that's why we do what we do, is because we believe that that healing is possible. And in fact, I don't know, even know if I should say it this way, but sometimes I find the big T traumas are actually easier to work with than the little T traumas, because you got to go searching for the little T traumas. People have been through the big T traumas. They kind of know what has impacted them.
Yeah, it's true. I never even thought of it that way.
And most of us have a combination of little T and big T. It's not that we fall into one camp or another, but absolutely, and knowing what we know. I know this is turning into a bigger conversation, so maybe we'll pick it up on another session, but trauma therapy, like understanding how we heal trauma, because it's not just telling the story, it's not just exposure. I mean, there's different ways to heal trauma, but it really is about kind of reprogramming the brain and understanding kind of why we react to traumatic situations the way we do. Because quite honestly, anyone who has experienced a big T trauma, they survived that big T trauma. That's their body did exactly what it was supposed to do. But it's, what about now? Now that the trauma has passed, how do I live my life more fully? So yeah,
that's so holistic, right? Again, with the bigger conversation, but it is, there's, say there's 20 different things that you could be doing. 10 of those might not work for you, but the other 10 in combination could be that secret key. It's not really that secret, but that unlocks that healing for you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think this was like a really awesome way to start. We kind of have talked about doing this on a weekly basis. And whether it's me or whether it's Jacie or whether it's some of the other counselors on our team, we just thought it would be a nice opportunity for you to get to know us as counselors, but also to get you to hear what excites us. Because I feel like so often we're excited about what we do, but it's not always easy to convey that. And we want you to eavesdrop on our conversations. And hopefully if you're watching this and you see something or heard something that piqued your interest, and you want us to talk about it a little bit more, please drop us a comment or send us a message and we'll put it into the bowl. We'll take that first part of trauma out, but I feel like there might be a part 2 trauma conversation that we could talk about in the future.
Yeah, then part 3 and 4 and all the way up to 100.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jacie. It was really nice to see you this way. And we always have such great conversations that now we're just letting a few more people listen in and letting people join the conversation too.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I'm excited to see what kind of comments and responses that we get from people about future topics.
Yeah. If you're watching along and you've made it to the end, even just to say hello in the comments would really be awesome, so that we know that somebody is here with us and listening in. So until next week, so we're still actually going to work on the scheduling of when we're going to be posting these. But if there's a time of day or something that works better, let us know. But we'll get this one up and we'll plan for next week.
Have a good week, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah.